second Thursday. Tonight is our second Thursday educational event. This is put on by Physicians for a National Health Program of Minnesota and Healthcare for All Minnesota. So we thank you for joining us. A big shout out to the nurses who are here with us this evening. Happy Nurses Week. We're glad that you took a little bit of time to spend with us this evening. Our presentation tonight is taking control of the healthcare narrative. We're going to talk about setting the agenda and framing the conversation, and our special guest is George Greene of Connections Lab. So we're very thankful that he has some time with us this evening. Just a couple of notes before we get started. We have a long presentation. It's full of lots of great content. So we're going to save questions until the very end on tonight's presentation. So just if you want to write down your questions, jot down some, we'll get to those toward the end of our meeting tonight. And then we're going to use the raise hand function. And just a reminder, if you haven't used it in a while, it's down at the bottom of your screen under reactions. So we're going to get started right away. And Ann Jones is going to help set the stage here. Ann?
Hello, and welcome to our monthly educational event. Thank you especially to Judy Barton, our Healthcare for All Minnesota Director of Operations, and Jen Crawford, Executive Director of Physicians for a National Health Program, Minnesota, for hosting this evening. And my name is Ann Jones. I'm a retired registered nurse and Vice Chair of Healthcare for All Minnesota and Chair of the Healthcare for All Minnesota and PNHP Minnesota Education and Outreach Committee. If you are joining us for the first time this evening, a special welcome. If you are back to learn more about how to be an advocate for fixing our broken healthcare payment system, welcome back. And if you invited someone to join you this evening, extra points. That's what organizing is all about. Jen told you we're sponsored by our Education and Outreach Committee. And again, welcome. So this program came together as a result of some conversation during one of our committee meetings. We had done a program on citizen lobbying in February. Our topic in April was organizing and base building. And then Jerry Whitty, one of our amazing activists in the Duluth area, said, kind of just in conversation, how do we teach people to stay out of the conservative frame when we're trying to talk about fixing how we pay for healthcare? I think Judy might have said something about helping people talk about this issue. And so then I piped up and suggested framing and messaging healthcare reform would be a great topic for our May educational event. And then Dave Garibaldi asked if we had considered asking George Greene of Connections Lab to speak. So that's kind of how we got here with this program this evening. So the plan for this evening, after a welcome and some event details, I want to talk about why we chose this topic and what we hope you'll take away from the information our speaker is going to provide for us this evening. We do have some Q&A time at the end, probably about 10 minutes. And as Jen said, we'd like it. Please make a note of your questions and have them ready for the end, and you'll get a chance to ask them personally. And I will have a few announcements after the Q&A and then a call to action and a wrap up. So why this program? Well, there's no sugarcoating this. People have been trying to fix how we pay for healthcare in this country for over 100 years. When it comes to single payer financing for healthcare, we have the policy, the economics, and even public opinion, if people are asked the question correctly, on our side. But we are up against powerful, well-financed opposition to disrupting the business model of the for-profit side of healthcare. The medical industrial complex spends more money lobbying Congress on their interests than any other industry, including banking and finance and the fossil fuel industry. It takes a massive amount of public support to make a change as fundamental to people's lives as reforming and changing how people experience access to healthcare. Even then, public opinion is not enough. We have to elect people who will legislate this change, and then we have to have their backs. We have serious ideological barriers to overcome. And even though most people know our system is bad, We are up against fear of change, and the opposition is very good at exploiting people's fears. So each and every one of us can be an activist when it comes to an issue we care about. None of us is born knowing how to organize for social change, but there are skills that can be learned. That's what this evening is about. Educating the public about an issue and organizing for change are different from advocacy. So again, we've done our 2 events this spring. So in this case, to win universal single payer financing for healthcare, with this program, we wanted to focus on information you can use to communicate more effectively and bring more people to the fight. We have to create enough political power to win the change we want. So Healthcare for All Minnesota and Physicians for a National Health Program exist for one reason: to fix how we pay for healthcare in this country and make sure we have comprehensive, affordable, high quality healthcare for all of us. Everybody in, nobody out. To get there, we have to educate, organize, and legislate. And educating means the voters, the public, and elected officials. Organizing means build a base of support. And legislating means partnering with elected officials to helping to craft the bills that will actually reflect good policy. If you are not yet on our mailing list, please go to our website, hca-mn.org, and give us your contact information. We send out monthly information and occasional calls to action, as well as opportunities to volunteer, which are going to come up more as we get into spring, summer, and fall. And again, I want to just stress that ordinary people will turn public opinion into political will. Fixing how we pay for healthcare is going to happen only when we, the people, make it inevitable. This is going to take lots of conversations with friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, legislators, candidates, business owners, other organizations we need to bring into this work. Also important are the outreach events that we're going to be doing this summer: public forums, park events, farmers markets, parades, town halls. Please help us with things, with suggestions, and then step up and organize and join us in volunteering for these. But we want to learn to have effective conversations that will help us build our base of support. So with that, I will introduce our speaker for this evening. George Greene is the founder of Connections Lab here in Minnesota to train activists and advocates on effective framing and messaging for progressive issues and values. He has provided a lot of training sponsored by the Democratic Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota. He has also consulted with and done work for the Mandela Project in Africa through the University of Minnesota, the Council on American Islamic Relations in Florida, other state Democratic parties, and various issues groups. Mr. Greene has a background in psychology and a long career in television and media, pioneering interactive multimedia productions. He has taken a special interest in the science of human communication, what works and what doesn't when we're trying to persuade and advocate for change. So this evening, our speaker will focus on helping us build our skills related to framing and messaging healthcare reform. So I'm going to turn this over to our speaker, George, and I'm going to take my slides down and you take it away.
All right. Well, it's really good having you all here today. And I just want to point out, I've got some kind of cold thing going, so my voice is kind of weird. And so I think I need some health care for George, Minnesota, to help me out. But there's that. Tonight, I want to ask you all to consider being bold in your messaging, that we need to be on the offense, that we can take control. We are in charge of this. And we'll get into more of that there. I'm also going to ask that, when, after you leave, try to notice things going on in the messaging, pay more attention to what's happening in messaging and what's behind the messages. Take it all apart and put it back together again. That's a great way to learn. That may require that you occasionally watch Fox News, but if you put a timer on it, or tell your family, they can save you before you've been doing it too long. And then our goal, I'm going to go over a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. My goal is mainly to show that there is another way to look at messaging, a way that I think we can all use on the left, and that if you have a few moments in here where there are things that you hadn't heard before and or that interest you, that's kind of my goal, is that you're going to want to know more about this and how to do it, and so that'll be great. And I won't name names, but I do see at least a few people on here who are pretty good at this stuff. So good to see them again too. So anyway, okay, well, I'll go through this stuff very quickly. I'll also afterwards provide the script, such as it is at this point, and that'll be available for people, and Ann is recording it, so we'll have that. And let me start out by saying that the left does have a messaging problem, contrary to what you hear from many people. I will offer as proof the fact that if what we've been doing for 50 years actually worked, then we wouldn't be sitting here breaking even with people who traffic in Jewish space lasers and other crazy conspiracy things. I mean, seriously, we can't do better than break even with these guys. That's crazy. And we actually can do it. But I think I personally believe that it's going to take us learning different ways to message and unlearn ways that we have learned that don't work very well. And one of the reasons that our methods are not quite as effective is because we have not really been using the science of how people really think to create our messages. We pick up tidbits here and there, but we don't seem to comprehensively understand the psychology. The bad news is that the conservatives and the corporations study and use the science of how humans think, and they've been doing that for 50 years. And in many cases, they dominate the public discourse. So this is something we need to get on right now. And let me address something before I go on to the rest. Because we're talking about using psychology here, the question comes up, is this manipulative? Let me point out a couple things. Anything that comes out of your mouth is a message. Words have baggage, they carry meanings. The question is whether your message is going to convey meaning that helps or hurts your effort, and if you've been honest about it. If you're being honest and you're getting information into people's brains in a way that helps them understand it, to understand the facts, and you're honest about it, I don't consider that manipulation. And this is a technology. I mean, if technology is the application of science to real world purposes, then applying science is what we should do. And it's not inherently good or evil. Okay. It's just like any other technology. You can use technology to power cities or blow them up. But we must use the power of the technology we have in psychology with honesty and integrity if our worldview is ever going to be dominant again, and if we're going to get our messages about healthcare across to people. The opposition has a number of advantages. Number one, they're unconstrained by truth. I think that's pretty obvious. 4 years of Trump and more kind of we see where that's going. They actively use common propaganda techniques that have been known for decades, if not centuries. Anything that works is fair game. I do not recommend you use propaganda techniques. They control the agenda. That's why the most asked question that I get is, what do we say when they say? That's got to change. Okay. They also message strategically. So, for example, we think tactically. We're really, really good at tactical things. We think about what it takes to win today, but we never lay the groundwork for our worldview so that when our ideas or candidates get to the door, the voters aren't primed to receive them. Voters instead have been primed with the endlessly repeated conservative messages that connect to underlying conservative narratives and values. Those same set of values are evoked and messaged across all issues. So the message that works today also builds a message about who our opposition is and what they believe. They've been so successful that our candidates and some of us feel the need to feel the pull to move rightward to win. That we should never be in that situation. I'm going to share my screen real quick. fix my voice. I don't have a lot of slides. I have some just on the beginning here. So the situation right now is that we seem to be playing on the conservatives' home field. That we're not in charge of this conversation, and so we need to do that. We decide what we talk about, and we have to put the corporations and the insurance companies on the defensive, responding to the things we want them responding to, forcing them to talk about healthcare in our frames rather than theirs. So how do we turn this around? We'll take the briefest look at the science. We go into some of this stuff a lot more deeply in our regular 3-hour workshop, but we'll take a quick look, and then we'll talk about what we can do to get the upper hand. So first off, people don't think like we think they think. We think that if we go out and we have our facts in order, we have logically reasoned through all of this, and we just go out and we get in front of people and say, here are the facts and here's my reasoning. As I said before, if this had worked, we wouldn't be breaking even with these guys. Our fights would not be that difficult. All you'd have to do is say, here it is in black and white, and people have that VA moment, go, oh, I get it. And that's not really what happens now, is it? So the science is relatively simple. It's all about associations. Human brains make associations between things in the real world and between the ideas we are taught and experiences as we grow. Like this little guy. So as we grow, all these things are being built into our brains. In fact, these the ideas that we have in our heads, the concepts, all our memories, everything about us is physical. And I mean that literally. It lives inside those things. Those are brain cells. It's all in there. And brain cells work in certain ways. And they're first off, they're interconnected neural structures that understand how the world works. But they also have ways of learning. And I'm going to be real simple on this, but repetition is something that strengthens frames. And when it does, the connections between nerve cells get stronger. And this is important because in our everyday mode, when we're not thinking like Einstein, our brains need to be able to get to the things we know very quickly. And one of the ways that happens is as we learn and the more things get repeated, the stronger those connections get, it's easier for our brain to get to those ideas. I'm really oversimplifying here, but that's in a way literally true. So not in a way, it is literally true. The more a concept or frame is repeated, the stronger it gets. Stronger it gets, the more likely it is to be used again. So whatever gets talked about the most becomes the dominant network in your brain. This not only happens for individual concepts or ideas, it happens for your worldview, for your philosophies, all sorts of other things. This is the way you look at things. And just in some recent research, I threw this one in here, belief in all statements, be they plausible or implausible, increases with repetition. So yes, it is possible for you to gain control of your brain and resist, people talking about the latest conspiracy theories, but not everybody's doing that all the time, including us. I mean, our brains work in a couple of different modes, and there's some really deep science on this right now. But our default state is we're running through life and we're just getting stuff done, and we think in a very fast way. And slow thinking, rational, logical, factual, that takes more energy. It's something we're not always doing. So most of what that comes into us comes in through the slow brain. We have to actively take time to expend the brain energy to get into rational thought and all of that. And it's just, for many people, it's just not something that they really feel like doing all the time. Maybe they can. I'm not dissing them, saying that's just the way it goes. Pardon me, I need another sip for my voice. So for any issues, in fact, for how you look at the world, there are different ways that people build worldviews in their heads. And I'm not going to go much more deeply into that, but understand that whatever world is built into their heads is the one that they are going to use to interpret what it is that's coming in to their brain. The outside world, they're going to look at it, and it's going to be colored by what it is that's come before. So let me get to the next slide here. So let's take a little bit of a look at this. And I'll do this with the concept that frames are stories. And in a story, you have actors and roles, and there are scenes where it takes place. And importantly, there are scenarios. There are things that happen in that frame and that belong there, and there are things that don't. A simple example is if I'm flying from DC to Los Angeles and the shark sitting next to me asks me if I'm going to eat my peanuts, there's something wrong with that story because there shouldn't be a shark sitting next to me. Okay. There are things that are proper in an airplane flight story that should be there, and there are things that don't belong in the story. So think about this. The conservative frame for healthcare is cost. And I mean cost in a negative way. It's going to cost you more. It's going to be a cost problem for you. Taxes they talk about and all these things. That all fits into the cost frame. What's notoriously missing from that cost frame is people's health, real, actual people. Our frame of people, this is one frame, but the frame of people's freedom to live healthy and secure lives is about people. There's little room for discussion about taxes and such. You start talking about people and all of the stories that there are in healthcare, of which there are zillions of them. These stories focus attention on people, not on the money. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about the great advantages of single payer healthcare. I'm just saying that this frame about people's health is the one that should be dominant in what we talk about. And if you change the frame, it changes what gets talked about, because in that frame are the things that ought to be in the frame, and there are things that don't fit. So our goal is to have our messages so widespread and repeated that the pathways to our voters, or I'm sorry, to our opponents' ideas get weaker and ours get stronger. And this is important. And this is a metaphor with pathways, but I mean, think about those as neural connections. That's almost, it is literally true. And when we do this, we want to talk about right and wrong. Making messages is difficult, especially if you believe that you really have to, go out and have every fact and every statistic and every, logical turn of brain that you've had in mind before you can talk about this. The way to get out there and talk about it, and anybody can do this, is to talk about right and wrong. Because all politics is moral. It's all about what's right and wrong. When you're talking to somebody, you can say what's right and wrong, because I know that my Aunt Mary had to drive when her clinic closed in Baudette. She has to go and drive 200 miles to get her dialysis. Now that's a compelling story, and everybody can see what's wrong about that. And that's a way that we can get everybody making messages about healthcare without having necessarily them going into every last detail. Again, not that you never should use facts and logic, but it's just not necessarily the way that it works. It certainly doesn't work well. I'm going to blow out of this here. Okay, so over time, the big ideas, our moral values, form our worldview, and our physical brains interpret the world in terms of what we already know. So this means that we should spend virtually all of our time making sure people know what we want them to know, staying on our message. We must dominate the moral conversation about healthcare. So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about agenda setting. And you can use a little political jujitsu here. We want you to take charge, to change the frame, change the story of the debate to our story, and offer the people a new perspective to think about healthcare and its related issues. And this is because when they do, they're more likely to support this, and they're more likely to take actual action to do something. Be on the offensive and control the narrative and control the opposition. This is important. Make them respond to you. Don't worry excessively about what they'll say if we say this. Trust me, they will always have something ridiculous and counterfactual designed to keep you off your message and waste your time. Our message is most powerful when it is designed to most effectively accomplish our goals, not to prove our opposition wrong. Now, again, not to say you should never do that. 90% of your time, you should be out there talking about what we want to talk about. Don't help them by spending all of your time responding. This is not debate club. They don't care if they're proven right or wrong. It's a mistake we made. We're not trying to win the argument. Their prime directive is to distract entirely from their own prime directive of concentrating wealth to protect the profits and power for insurance and drug companies. They accomplish that goal by getting people arguing about the subject from their perspective. The whole huge pile of and disinformation is simply meant to distract from what they are doing and to create controversy with doubt, uncertainty, distraction, and even fear that drives a narrative that does not help us in any way. Responding to these guys just keeps us off our message and instead arguing with them in their frame, right where they want us. In fact, the example that I see from time to time is whatever issue group it is sends out a thing to everybody and to people to a mailer, and the mailer has in big bold letters, "This is what my opponent says," and then below it is a paragraph, not in bold letters, that basically debunks it. So now what that has done is now educated people as to every single one of their messages, because we've recountered every one of them. People might not have known those things before. They may not have thought about their argument. Why are we giving them their argument? And especially since this isn't a terribly effective way to get our ideas into people's brains. So remember, and this is true in that situation, it's true if you go on TV, if there's an interviewer, or if you're arguing with somebody online, you are under no obligation at all to answer your opponent's or your interviewer's question, or even the specifics of the question if it does not further your message. You can watch some people. Nancy Pelosi is absolutely the most adept person at this I've ever seen. She'll get asked a question and she goes, "That's a distraction. What's important is," and then she talks about that. We have to get into that. And the reason I stress this is because it's something we don't do very often. And we fall back into the habit of beating people over the heads with facts and logic. And that there is no science to show that really works. And all the science shows that talking about what we want to talk about, approaching people on a moral and emotional dimension, is far more effective. Now, this does take discipline and practice. This is a skill. And it means that all your people in the organization must learn the skills to frame a message effectively. The end result is that people hear our messages in our frames repeated over and over, which is what they will do when they're in their brains. And when our messages dominate, people gradually adopt our perspective, whether they are aware of it happening or not. So in healthcare, what follows here are a number of other techniques or approaches we can take. And so I'll just blow through these here in no particular order. But number one, I think here has to be that healthcare has the dubious distinction of being able to tell more stories that hit home than any other issue. Everybody on this call, either themselves or in their family or somebody they know close to them, has a healthcare horror story to tell. If they're from Canada, they might have healthcare wonderful stories to tell. So if you've got a Canadian friend, tell that story about your Canadian friend or European friend where things are good. That's great. But tell stories. People love stories. It's a great way to get information, and people pay attention to stories. They can relate to stories. They may want to tell you a story about their healthcare experience. That's a great way to get a conversation started. So, don't be afraid to do that. The only caveat I make is make sure that your stories are true. The way to do that is this is a story you experienced or your family experienced, or that someone told you directly, not a third party story, not something made up. This is especially important for candidates. Obviously Ronald Reagan didn't care about that when he made up the story about the welfare queens driving pink Cadillacs. But we have more integrity than that, don't we? Yes, we do. I mentioned it before, dropping the facts and logic. Again, not a blanket prohibition, not to say never do it, but if you lead with it, you're going to turn voters off. There are exceptions, obviously, but again, get out of that habit. Go there when you have to, but otherwise lead with these other things. You obviously do have to know what you're talking about, but just know that that way is far less effective. And just keep them in your back pocket and pull them out when you absolutely have to use them. Drop their frames and messages and their code words. So again, I asked you to notice things before. Watch what it is that the opposition says, and notice if there are, what is the message they're saying? What frame are they in? What do they get? What kind of story are they telling? Is it a cost story? Is it a loss story? Is it a scary story? What are they doing? Take a close look at that. And then code words or dog whistles are generally things that are meant to trigger other ideas out there. So, for example, they will talk about healthcare and say that, well, your taxes are going to go up. Well, the reason they'll do that is because they've already primed people that taxes are a burden and they're bad. And so that's going to resonate with a lot of people. Oh, I don't want my taxes to go up, so I don't want this. So but don't repeat them, even to debunk them. There are people who will debunk them. Bill Nye will do a good job of that. Journalists can do that. You can do that when you have more time and you've got a willing listener. But for the most part, debunking them keeps us in their frame and wastes time better spent repeating our messages. So keep that in mind. This is the hardest thing for people to learn and it's hard for me. I struggle with it too. I have to remember that I can't go there first. I have to practice this other way. Now now that I've just told you that, I'm going to tell you the exceptions. So there's an exception in that there are things called contested frames. And in this case, the two contested frames are freedom and cost. We use the word freedom and the conservatives use the word freedom. And the health insurance companies will use that, and they'll use cost. But we mean different things by those words. We're telling different stories about those words, and it's okay to take it back, especially because we know that in the current system is a mess, and our system is cheaper with better outcomes. So we can talk about that. And so if for freedom, the opposition uses freedom to convince people to lose their employer plans. They'll be losing the freedom for this wonderful gift that employers give them, because they will also frame it as a gift rather than income, which is what it really is. You earned it. You wouldn't work at that place unless you got health care. That's part of your compensation. Always think of it that way. And so in this case, we can say things in freedom. We can say, look, you're not free if you cannot stay well by getting the health care you need. You're not free if you have to sell your house or go on GoFundMe to beg to pay medical bills. There are all sorts of freedom stories about what it means to have your health and to be able to get things taken care of very quickly. When you talk about cost, absolutely. Pound home and repeat the message. It costs less, better outcomes. Like what was the old thing about beer or whatever, something and less filling, but always do that. Cause less, better outcomes. And I would, and you have to be careful with this. It's important to say this. You might want to consider doing this more towards the end of what you're talking about. If there's an opposition person around, only in that you don't want to then open the conversation up and let your opponent make it all about cost. If they do, bring it back on target. Remember, you don't have to answer their questions. You don't need to respond to them. And of course, the biggest thing that we want to talk about is people's health. This is not about money, really. This is not about the free market. This is about human beings and their health, people you know and love and how healthy they are. That's what we should spend most of our time talking about and showing and saying, look, this plan means you don't, or Aunt Sally doesn't have to drive 200 miles for her thing. This plan means there are going to be rural clinics. The hospitals won't close, that physicians will find that going to rural America is going to be a plus for them rather than a negative. Those kind of things. All right. Create controversy. This is something we're not used to doing because we respond so much to what the opposition says. We don't create controversy in the beginning. And what I mean by that is take a page, I hate to say, from Tucker Carlson's playbook, but he does this by asking questions. And there's nothing wrong or inherently evil about asking questions. So for example, why do we need insurance companies overruling our doctors? So think about what happens when you ask that question. You have now put the opponents on the offensive. You're getting people to ask that question in their own brains. Well, yeah, why do we need these guys overruling our doctors? Some guy sitting at a desk and wherever they're at, making decisions about my health care, and they're not my doctor. Why do we need that? This is a great thing. This puts our opponents on the offensive or on the defense, and it puts us on the offense, and it gets people thinking about that particular problem that gets in between us and our doctors. It forces them into our frame. Another one would be, why are conservatives and corporations preventing us from having a system that costs less with better outcome? Or why do they keep a system that siphons off so much profit to make us sicker? There are a ton of other questions, but those are great questions to ask. That's a great way to get your message out there that gets people thinking. Questions always get people thinking. Next, very important, know your audience. The vast majority of people we need to communicate with are not steeped in the details. Find the value and or emotion that appeals to them. And you can do this by asking some open-ended questions, asking people about their healthcare stories. But, that's part of knowing your audience, is to probe a little bit and find out what they are. Also, most people just want to be healthy. Talk about how our current system fails and how the new system succeeds, because it has succeeded everywhere else it's been tried. And very important, again, in your audience, realize that the troll on social media is not your audience. Your job is not to convince them of anything. You're not going to convince them of anything. Their brains are wired so solidly in the opposition that they're not going to change without intervention. And so, that's not your audience. The audience are the people who are watching you in the troll. That's your audience. They are going to be way more persuadable. And if you're doing that by me reaching them with on a moral level and on a emotional level, then you're going to be much more successful, and people will, again, get them talking about their healthcare stories. Okay, and then I want to talk about inside and outside voices. And it's important that we know when we're speaking and when we're speaking to ourselves and when we're speaking to the public. Ann and I were talking about this. I don't know, I think she came up with this or mentioned this, but inside we educate, outside we motivate. And we may say things together here that we might not say in public. Notice what those things might be and act accordingly. I think it's important to understand that. In fact, one of those things is jargon and acronyms. So outside our advocacy, many people have no idea, nor do they really care what our jargon means or what acronyms like CRT mean. It bores them. It makes them feel small because maybe they feel something they don't. And it really just confuses people. And it's very, very easy to do. There are words that we think everyone knows that everyone doesn't know. So there's something to notice, and purge your messages of jargon and acronyms. I mean, unless there happens to be something where you're trying to take back the narrative. And if you're trying to take back a word, you better have a very, very well-funded program over multiple organizations nationwide if you're going to do that. That's another whole animal. But anyway, there's that. Our job is to communicate, and turning people off and making them feel stupid because they don't know all the fancy words is not going to help, or they haven't done the logic or looked at all the facts. Make things in plain and plainer English all the time. So here's an overarching frame, and let me mention that there's the concept of what I call the magic bumper sticker, the one bumper sticker that rules them all. That if we could only find that one set of 5 words that fit on a bumper sticker, we will have found the perfect message for everyone, and this will always work. Now, not to say that it's not good to have a very good short message that we say all the time. For example, I like costs less, better outcomes. But let's do that. But you have different people you're talking to, and different people may respond differently too. If you're talking to a small business, you're going to talk about something different. You're going to talk about something that's going to make their life easier. For example, if small business doesn't have to worry about being able to offer healthcare to their employees because they're getting it anyway, that makes small business more competitive. I went to the Capitol probably 15 years ago. Actually, when the Minnesota Health Plan, or the Minnesota Health Plan, the exchanges were coming up and all that. And I went there and I got my minute and a half and I said, I got a guy who's perfect. I want to hire this guy. I know him. I've worked with him. I know he's honest. I know he knows his stuff. This is technical stuff. It's not easy to find people. And I can't hire him because his wife's having a baby and I can't offer this person health insurance. So I lost this guy. That's the kind of story a small business person will respond to. I didn't go through a bunch of deep logic and facts. I just said my story about what the deal was, and that helps. Here's a frame that I like, and this came out of a group in Pine City. We did a workshop up there. They were very interested back during that time, and they came up with this, and I think it's brilliant. Healthcare for all is healthcare made easy. And let's just think, and in any case, whether you like that or not, this is a great example. Let's live inside this hard and easy frame for a moment. Everything about healthcare is hard. Everybody knows it. You could lose it if you lose your job. You pay higher and higher deductibles every year. Even if you get it through your work, some people are paying into that now. You can't see a doctor for more than 15 minutes. You have high deductibles. Insurance companies, not doctors, have the final say over your treatment, things like this. These things are hard. Healthcare is hard. It's a mess. It's difficult to work with. That's not a bad frame. A good frame from what we're offering is that it's healthcare made easy. Things are just a whole lot easier. You don't have to worry about some person sitting at a desk somewhere saying, no, I don't care what the doctor says. We're not going to cover that. We're not going to do that. That kind of thing. This healthcare made easy is really good. And think about people thinking about this program, this system, as something that does make it easy. Think what's going on in their head. My goodness, this plan makes it easy for everybody. This is good. Easy is good. Hard is bad. These are very simple concepts, but this is, these things, that easy frame in your brain connects to all sorts of other things that are easy and that are good. The hard frame, when that comes up, that goes to all sorts of things that are not good. And so what we're saying here is this relieves a burden. This relieves you of all this. These kind of things at this really deep level are really important. If you can tap into that, this really helps to persuade people and bring them over to give them a new perspective. You can also say things like, there is no reason it needs to be this way, or it doesn't have to be this way. Everywhere else it's been tried, it works better and it's cheaper. You can say things like that, and that helps. And then, of course, back it up with stories about real people and real experiences, how something made things harder in the current system, how the fact that you're on Medicare made something easier. Although I do understand that the insurance companies now are running. I won't get into that right now. Okay, here are some other frames that you can use to promote healthcare for all. Obviously, health. Talk about health. Talk about feeling healthy and not. That's important. This was mentioned before. Inevitability. This is a subtle but important frame. In fact, I've used this with my friend Phil, who's on this call. Phil Adam is the electric car guy in Minnesota. He knows more about electric cars than anyone, even Elon Musk. And the thing is we all know that electric cars are inevitable. They're gonna come. They'll end up eventually being cheaper than gas cars. They're less hassle on it. Talking about it is approaching it as being an inevitable, whether you say those words explicitly or not. It's if your demeanor and your language explicitly or implicitly speaks about the Minnesota healthcare plan as inevitable, so people will come to think of it that way. This is called priming. In this case, setting up an idea that permeates your messaging so that people come to accept it, maybe without even knowing it or how it happened. If it's inevitable, then the arguments against it seem weaker and eventually superfluous. This works for Phil's electric cars. It works for climate change and many other issues. The other way you can talk about the current system is that it's a burden. Kind of mentioned that before. Again, healthcare has the dubious honor of having endless personal stories of pain and hardship caused by the current system. Talk about how our plan relieves those burdens. One form of that story, which can be either explicit or implied, usually better if it's implied, is that the victim, villain, hero story. And the villains here, as whatever stories you tell, it should be apparent that the villains are the insurance company and the legislators who support them. The victims, of course, are Americans in a broken system. And then, of course, healthcare for all, your organizations are the heroes relieving that burden. And again, you don't have to explicitly say victim, villain, hero, but if that's the backstory, that's an interesting way to approach it, and it works at a very, very deep level in the brain. One that works for us is success. And there are plenty of stories of successes of the single payer systems in the rest of the world and what they mean to real people. I mentioned that before. Kind of along with burden is about the current system is talk about dysfunction and breakage. You can say the current system is broken. It doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. Just another one. Incompetence is a good one when talking about the insurance companies denying care. And also when, because the person making that decision is not a doctor. The other thing is insurance companies are obviously incompetent. They've clearly proven that they cannot run a healthcare system that works for everyone at a reasonable cost. So that's not good. One that's good to use with big pharma is predation. And again, you don't have to use that word, but if your story shows that the big pharma is predatory, that triggers that predation frame in people's heads, whether they know it or not. For example, big pharma's price gouging shows they care more about money than about people. Notice I said money. You could say profit, but I like money in there too. Again, in an attempt to simplify the message a little bit. Or why does big pharma care more about money than people? Making it a question. There's an interesting frame of a barrier. Insurance companies are just in the way. Why do we even need them? Why are there middlemen skimming money? That, showing this as a barrier, barriers are things that people want to get through. Barriers are in general a bad thing. And so, you can evoke that without saying it in a story you tell or whatever. But why is it that I ran up against? Why couldn't I get what I needed out of the healthcare system? Why did I have to apply 3 times before I could get pre-authorization? That kind of thing. Set up again. That triggered this other idea, this barrier idea that's in people's heads, and all the things that have to do with barriers. And another one is taking, which you see a lot, your opposition using it. They're going to take your great healthcare away from you that your company gives you. But we can say, why does a company clerk get to take away my health care that my doctor wants for me? These are ideas. You will probably think of other ones as you really start looking at what the opposition is doing and looking at the things that we care about and the way that we look at things. You may find a frame that works for you, and that's fine, and or a frame that's very apt for that particular situation, that particular audience in there. And we're getting close here to the end here, which is going to leave a lot of time for questions, which will be good. I'm going to talk about something that I'm calling cross support. And this is a concept in framing that is very important. Many of the frames we've spoken about do double duty, and it's important duty. They work across other issues. Okay. So when we say, for example, that insurance companies take healthcare decisions away from patients and doctors, it sets up the idea that our opponents like to take things away from us. So think about that, and it works in healthcare message, but it works in others. Why are they taking away our kids' right to know the truth about slavery? Why are they taking away our right to vote by purging voter registrations? There are all sorts of things that are being taken away from us right now. Women can tell you right now about a big thing that's just been taken away from women. There are tremendous stories, but think about what happens there. That taking frame works in these other issues. So if we're using that frame talking about healthcare, but we're also using it talking about other issues, our opposition comes to be seen as people who take things from us. So there's our messages can do double duty. This happens best when we simplify our messages down to the simplest way we can say them, and when we talk about why we care about it. So if you're ever stuck, here's a trick that I call toddler logic, and this is, what does a kid do when they ask you a tough question? The kid says, tell me about this, and you give them an answer, and they go, but why? And then you give them another answer, and then they go, but why? And eventually by the end of the thing, it's, well, Junior, it's so that you don't have a world where you're choking on the air. Hopefully something more artfully put than that. But you get down to a moral value. I care about you, Junior. I want you to live in a world that is a safe world for you and for everyone else, and for the trees and the birds and everything else. You get down to what you care about. And those are the most important messages we do. Because messaging with core values, this is what people respond to. And we have to get them off of the values that are being pushed by the opposition, which in this case, in healthcare, are largely conservative ideas and values. We have to get people off of that, give them another way to look at it. And I can tell you this, when you do give them another way to look at it, you get about 30% of the time, you're going to get a really interesting reaction. I mean, when you think about people, even people who are very steeped in the conservative ideology, this is all they've heard. It's been repeated over. It's the only way they've thought about it. And they may even say that to you. They may go, you know what? I never thought about it that way. I've had people who are staunch conservatives look at me and say, huh, I've never thought about it that way. Now, they immediately try, their brain kicks in and tries to, find a reason to stick with what it is that they know, because, challenging people's assumptions causes their brain to get into defensive mode. In fact, in some cases will cause people to get hostile, but it got in there, right? You put it in there. The next person they talk to, that same idea comes across. That person's talking to their, militia group, and they start talking about healthcare, and they go, I was talking to this guy, and here's what he told me. Just spread the message to a few other people. More repetition. Any advertising is good advertising. That idea. So it's important to repeat it, but give people this other perspective, because they may never ever have thought about it. And if you're doing it from a moral dimension, now you've made that connection to what they really believe, what they really care about, and that is super powerful. So, and it accomplishes our prime directive, which is to spread our perspective and make more people who think like we do. So I hope that this has been something that has set off a lot of ideas in your heads, and has gotten you to want to know more. There's probably not much more we can expect after throwing a lot of things at you than wanting to know more. But if you do, there's a lot out there. I'll send some resources. Ann and I both. Hold up your book, Ann. I know you've got it. This is a good one. This is kind of what started this all off. It's Don't Think of an Elephant by George Lakoff. The title is its message, because I just said, don't think of an elephant. And what are you all thinking of? Doesn't matter that I told you not to. I said elephant and your brain cells lit up. This one started it off. There is a mountain of cognitive science, social science, behavioral economics, linguistics, and other areas of psychology, neuropsychology, that backs up this way of messaging. It's all out there. And like I say, there is no real science to show that hitting people with facts and logic and just burying them in that is more effective. It's just not. So that's where we're at. I hope you can join us at some of our other workshops. If you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, which will tell you what's going on, you can do that at connectionslab.org. That'll on the page, there are events, and has a thing. If you feel like donating to this, this is great. I'll point out that we are moving into a I've joined forces with a woman named Antonia Scatton. Antonia worked with George Lakoff for a year, coming up with her training program. We have very similar training programs, so we're combining them now. And we are meeting in first part of June or mid-June with the Association of State Democratic Committees. That's all the state chairs, vice chairs, executive directors from around the country. Ken Martin has been very supportive of our efforts here in Minnesota and has gotten us in touch with these folks. And we're doing a project with them to get this kind of learning out to the other state parties, because state parties are closest to the people like you and me who actually go and knock doors rather than pundits and others such in Washington or whatever. And so if you'd like to donate, that's great. If you know rich people have lots of money, have them come over there and donate too, because that's what we're going to need to make the materials and the media we need to do for that. That's my quick sales pitch here at the end. Anyway, Ann, let's open up for questions.
Okay, yes, we can. And I will make a pitch also. George Greene is giving us this information for free this evening. It's very valuable to us. And I would encourage you to go to connectionslab.org. Is that right, George? Yes. And offer a contribution. We're also considering, a longer workshop. If you think this has been helpful, this is really just a teaser. There's so much more to understand, and it takes practice to get good at this and get better at this kind of communication. So I will take, if people want to send us their impressions and consider whether or not we should follow this up with a longer workshop, and that we would each pay a modest amount for. But let's say, go ahead. You mentioned
can you
workshops?
not share the screen, because then we can see people?
I am going to take it down. And
I'll point out that any questions,
if you would like to turn your screens on, this is your opportunity to speak directly to our presenter. And I think, was it Jen who's going to help moderate the questions?
Yes, I can absolutely do that. So
Okay.
The first thing we're going to do is anyone who has a question for our guest today, please feel free to use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. You can push that, and then there is an option that says raise hand, and we'll just go in order of all of the hands that are raised.
and if there are questions that we don't get to that are burning questions for you, feel free to email me, and I'll answer those, or email them to Jen or Ann, and you get those to me, and then I'll send that with the follow-up materials. answers to those too. So,
And you don't have to be shy. We're all friends here. I apologize. I am having trouble seeing raised hands right now. Looks like someone has their hand up.
Yeah, Liz Ward.
Liz
Thank
Ward.
you.
Okay.
Oh, and Liz, you're muted if you want to unmute yourself. There you go. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm getting all excited for farmers markets and state fair and all that, but it is really kind of a scary thing to be faced with someone. And a lot of what you said, George, is very helpful. Would a subsequent workshop include things like role play and to get some of those questions and discussions that you do have? How does it start? What does it feel like? And that kind of thing.
Yeah, when we do the workshop, there are a number of different exercises, and in the new as Antonia and I are combining our workshops, we are also role playing. We think is a pretty important part of it, and also what we're doing is trying to make sure some of this stuff goes out to people so that you could do exercises in your local group. And that we think that's real important of those kinds of things. And also we do webinars every month. Those are all free. I'm technically retired. I'm not in it for the money, but we need operating expenses. Other than that, I want people doing this. That's, I mean, we're facing some major threats right now. So we will do that. But yeah, Liz, role play is important. And Liz, you mentioned scary. Let me say something. When I mentioned before about keeping this on a moral dimension about right and wrong, that everybody can have that conversation. Imagine, I say this in the workshop. You're walking up to a door and you're all wigged out and all freaked out because, I'm going to get to the door. What if this voter asks me a question I can't answer? I'm going to look like an idiot, right? Well, imagine what the person at the door is feeling. Here comes you. You got a clipboard, a T-shirt, you got festoon with buttons and bumper stickers on your hat, whatever. And they're going, oh, it's a political person. What if they ask me a question I don't know? I'm going to look like an idiot. So they open the door and they go, you know what? We're making dinner. And the advantage of keeping things on a moral right and wrong thing is nobody's going to feel stupid. Everybody can say what they feel is right and wrong about something. That it puts you right in that moral dimension. That's a great place to start things. And you can have a conversation with that. You can talk about it, especially with healthcare, because everyone's got stories. So who do we have next?
Oh, Jean.
All right. Next, we have Jean Foreman. Happy Nurses Week. Jean, feel free to ask George a question.
Hi, thank you. I have run into this a similar situation a couple different times in my again quest for healthcare for all. The most recent one actually was I was tabling in Northfield and offering again our flyers and information on healthcare for all. And a middle-aged man came up and he actually unzipped his jacket and kind of punched himself in the gut. He had a shirt on, so it was okay. But, he said like, well, you know what, maybe people need to lose 30 pounds like I just did and walk 2 miles a day. I used to not be able to, so he kind of like bragged, and there was another female volunteer. So me, 2 women volunteering. So he basically, kind of promoted his own like physique, he wasn't, any He-Man or anything, but, he promoted himself. I did counter to him to say, well, I'm happy for you to be in good health. what would you say to parents whose child is born and now is in the NICU with a congenital heart disease? They don't have a chance to lose 30 pounds and walk 2 miles a day. How would you think about that? And, he did walk away, grumped out about that. I also had someone that I spoke to in the last couple of years, a young man who did the same thing. It's like, people need to eat better. They need to run marathons like I do. And, and that person I actually countered with is like, well, I'm a nurse and I know that I've been in the ICU. I've actually taken care of marathoners in the ICU. They have heart attacks. They get cancer. So when was the last time maybe that you checked your blood pressure and your cholesterol levels? And again, very grumped out and didn't want to engage with me. But, that's fine. I might have had the last word, but I don't know if I had the best word. So thanks. I'll take your feedback. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, Jean. This is a good question. What was happening is the guy knew he's obviously a far right person. He's bought into that, obviously, and so this was his chance to own the libs. That's what he was doing. Okay, and so he's and he came up, and the frame that he was using, whether he knew it or not, was the pull yourself up by your bootstraps frame or the freeloaders frame. This is across so many issues on the right, and this is just what I talked about, cross support for between issues. I have to come up with a better name. You'd think I could do that. That's what that came out there, because he's using that exact same frame in all sorts of other situations too. So he came up to own the lid. So my question first off would be, this audience is, if it's this one guy, you can offer, I hear what you're saying. Rather than directly challenging him, you can say things like, that's certainly a good idea. I'm really happy, like I'm on Medicare and they give me silver sneakers and I can go and do that stuff. And I probably should, as you can tell. But there are people out there who don't really have healthcare, or the healthcare they have is so expensive because the insurance companies have, the only plan they can afford has a $10,000 deductible. I mean, that's kind of crazy, don't you think? And you just approach it differently. If you directly challenge him, you make him crazy. But what if he's not the only one standing there? Now, you were tabling, and so you got this guy and he walked up. Who's your audience? Not that guy. It's anyone else who's listening. And so if you don't directly challenge them, that doesn't give them the opportunity to get all steamed, with smoke coming out of their ears and then continue to attack you. You just grabbed the conversation back from that person and took it off in this other direction. And you're looking at the people around him and saying, I bet everyone here's got a story about how healthcare is not working for him. And now all of a sudden you control it, and you've pushed it into another thing. But yeah, I mean, I think your instinct was right. Your instinct was, okay, I need to get off of that, and we need to go, what about this other thing? That was great, Jean.
I think that was awesome. And they walk away, even if not convinced, they got to think about something.
Yes.
That they didn't think about until they talked to you.
And they may repeat what you said. Even to tell somebody how crazy they think it is, they repeated it. What if the person who hears it says, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea? Nicely done, Jean.
Thank you, Jean. I love that story. Awesome. Next is Susan. Susan, what is your question for George, please?
Hey, Susan. Oh, you're muted, Susan. Susan, you're muted.
There we go.
Nice.
It's not so much a question, it's just going along with the cost benefit for all. If the employer's not paying for our health care, then they should be able to give us a raise.
Yeah, this, well, and again, this is what's very, very important about thinking about the health insurance that you get from an employer as compensation. I mean, it literally is. It's
Mhm.
part of, I don't like the word benefits because it seems like I'm giving you something. It's not your health insurance, your 401k, matching contribution. That isn't a gift. I mean, not to say that the company isn't happy to do this and they feel good about it. That's great. But it's not a gift. Would you work there if you didn't get health insurance?
Couldn't afford to.
Yeah, or when you're looking at two different places and this one has health insurance and the 401k match, and this one doesn't, if all else is equal, you're going to go to the place that's got that. You earn that. That's you. That's yours.
Right.
And so, you could you could carry this out to the point where you say, that's great. I know, I do expect to either see a little extra in my paycheck. Because, for example, if it's handled through payroll taxes to pay for healthcare for all or single payer, if it is, and if the costs are cheaper, then one would expect there would be a cost difference in there. And depending on how much you think you can fight and win on that, you could say, hey, you were giving me $24,000 worth of health insurance. I want that extra $8,000 that we all just saved here.
Right.
We'll see
can
how
afford
far
our
you get with
groceries.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Just
Susan, for that.
before Dave gets to ask his question, I invite everyone who would be willing to turn on their screens. We set this up as meeting format this evening so that we could be face to face with each other, since we don't have very many opportunities, although we have more coming up. I invite you to turn on your screens. Thanks. Yay. Hi, people. Real people.
Real people, look.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry for that.
Dave,
All right,
Yeah, hi,
Dave.
George.
how are you doing?
I've got a comment first. I think we all know this, but I think it's worth remembering. We have been conditioned to believe the outrageously bad is normal in the United States
Mhm.
when it comes to healthcare and a number of other things, frankly. But to piggyback onto Jean's story, this is another point. That guy that talked to her is conditioned to believe that some people haven't earned the privilege of good health care. And, I think that's unique to the United States, that we are in this situation. And when they come up like that, are they salvageable? Do we even bother arguing with them, or do we just let them go away as a troll? And
That's a really good question. There's actually two parts in that. There is in the conservative worldview, there is this idea that of moral goodness. And so that if you work hard, working hard is morally good. The market rewards you. You get rewarded for working hard by making more money. And the more money you make, the money itself becomes a measure of your moral goodness. And this is, not that people are thinking this in exactly these words, but that's what comes across. So the opposite of that is that if you do not have money, then you are morally bad. You did not work hard. And this thinking is, you hear it in the messages that come out, just what you're saying, Dave, that this is how it happens. And so for the second part of the question, you have to look at that person and say, is this person, just like we do when we do the walk sheets, right? You've got your 1 to 5s, and you're not going to go talk to the strong right wingers. You're going to talk to the middle people, or the strong left wingers. You have to kind of decide there. I don't think it's a bad idea to plant an idea in that person's head, even if they don't want it, because there is the chance they might repeat it. But if you think the person is so far gone that they'll never do it, then you may have to let them go. But you may find a way to just throw another perspective on them and just give them a moment that where they're kind of brought up short. It's like, I never thought about that before. And that's a cool thing to do if you can do it. But, again, if you sense hostility, then, why waste your time? It's a bummer. Now, in the future, once we're all doing this and all of our messaging that gets out there is getting accepted, and we do it year after year after year, and we're doing it right, all of a sudden that person's going to hear more and more people saying exactly what you told him. And then who knows, some people may turn around. We have a webinar coming up here this month that a person that I met who absolutely completely changed every part of their life based on a few things one person told them, and who did not agree with them at all. I'm not saying this happens all the time, but this should be a very interesting webinar coming up on March 26th.
I will make a little, I'm going to make a pitch for reading George Lakoff, and there's other litture, and George has some other suggested reading on the website. Oh,
if you really like the nitty gritty, this is a great book, and it's a tour through behavioral economics and cognitive psychology in detail, but just really interesting book. And if you want the George Lakoff thing in full, there's Don't Think of an Elephant, but then there's this one, which is,
oh my God.
but this is the whole thing. This is when he came out with this idea about moral politics. This was his tome on that.
I was rereading my tabbed, underlined copy of George Lakoff, which I will tell you, I got interested in the science of messaging and framing after 2016 elections, that how the heck did this happen?
Yep.
And we realizing we have to apply a lot of these principles in moving our issue forward. But in the back of the book are a lot of tips and tricks for handling difficult situations. And I think these are some of the things we could practice also if we do go ahead with a little bit longer session. It's just very interesting stuff, I think. Hope you agree.
And there are other ways to look at it. Lakoff has a model that works really well to explain how everything fits together. I think he's got the most comprehensive model. There are some others out there. Drew Weston is great. He's got it. I'll give you a warning about Jonathan Haidt, his The Righteous Mind, which is the 3/4 of it is great. It's the last quarter where you find out that he's a conservative, and that all of a sudden starts to deviate and goes off in this other direction. So I'm not particularly convinced by his model, which I think is kind of weird, that conservatives have more values than liberals. That's like the most absurd statement I've ever heard. So just be careful if you're reading that one.
We
But
have
some
about
of it is good.
We have about 2 minutes, and
Okay.
I see one more question,
Liz up there.
and then we'll have to go to finishing up.
Liz, do you want to end our Q&A for us?
Yeah, I just
Liz.
wanted to add, the whole idea about messaging. And yes, we can read tomes and tomes. I think someone who does it really, really well online, I see her a lot on Twitter, is Politics Girl. She'll take a thorny thing, and in 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, does the perfect message. I just wish we could all bottle a little bit of what she has, and then our problems would be over. I
love her. I Am Politics Girl, I think. Or The Politics Girl.
Politicsgirl.com, and she's got her YouTube videos. And they take 1 minute to watch, and she will distill a thorny subject and into a bite-sized piece. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, finding those people who are really, really good at this kind of stuff is great. And we have some here. Again, I don't like to call people up. Rose may not remember, but I was in a meeting with her and Dean Phillips, I don't know, a few years ago. And Rose Roach is an absolute, amazing. Just watch what she does and you will learn.
Rose. gonna ask you to
Oh,
comment at
thank
the
you.
end. Fair
I
warning,
don't know what to say. Thank you.
fair warning, Rose. I'm gonna ask you
I
to
only
comment
speak the
at the end.
truth.
I see one thing in the chat I wanted to, I'm gonna share screen here for some announcements. Thank you so much, George. This has just been amazing. There's a link in the chat if anybody wants to contribute to Connections Lab to keep this work going. I've got, let me see, do I have the announcements up about what's coming up? I always call attention to our social media sites. I would like people to interact with our the social media sites that we have active right now. It's a really inexpensive way to share a message, whether you like social media or not. It is a very inexpensive and easy way to get our message out. I want to call your attention to the fact that events we have coming up are on the calendar, and it's an easy way on our website. It's a very easy way to share events with other people. And the website is up there, hca-mn.org. Big news, woohoo! Watch for the reintroduction of the Medicare for All Act of 2023. It's coming up next week on May 17th. First time ever that a major piece of legislation is going to be reintroduced at both the House of Representatives and the Senate of the U.S. Congress. Rose, do you have a site we should watch other than the pnhp.org website?
I don't yet. If I get something from Representative Jayapal's office for a link to, because they are going to live stream it, I will make sure that we put that on our website and get it sent out.
Okay. Thursday, Rose is going to be in DC. That's pretty amazing. Also, our chair. Thursday, June 8th is our next month's evening session. It will be a summer update and kind of it's post legislative session, assuming the legislative session ends on May 22nd as it's supposed to. So that's 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, June 8th. Those are just the logos for our social media sites. We do need your help to spread the message. Oh, whoops. One more announcement. Twin Cities Pride Festival is a big event for us. We talked to hundreds of people about this issue, hundreds of people, most of whom who have very big challenges with getting the healthcare they need. That's June 24th and 25th in Loring Park. And I want to just put out a call right now that we will be looking for volunteers. We have a booth both days, all day, and happy to have volunteers for that event. We'll be and so you could my contact information is at the end of the slides. Also, you could just go on our website and contact the info@hca-mn.org. And more about that, we will put out a call in maybe our post meeting information. And then as activists and organizers, please let us know of events and speaking opportunities. Where should we be showing up? And how, and please feel free to help coordinate that. And then we are asking you to take action on an important bill that is in front of the legislature right now. There's lots of things happening, but one thing we want to call your attention to that has just was on track to do well with the current mix in the legislature and has had a bit of a wrench thrown in the works. It's called the Keeping Nurses at the Bedside Act. Lots of work has been done over the years in many states, including Minnesota, to draw attention to the problems with nursing, staffing levels, patient safety, workplace violence. This issue has taken on particular importance in the post public health crisis that we just went through, and the increasing influence of corporate control of our healthcare system. So this session, it looked like nurses were well positioned to put forward and pass legislation that would address staffing, workplace violence, and measures to recruit and retain healthcare workers, not just nurses, but all. This bill does not mandate nurse-patient ratios. It requires that hospitals and healthcare facilities include nurses and unlicensed assistive personnel on staffing committees. Facility management retains 50% of the positions on these committees. It is really a pretty modest proposal. So this bill was due to pass until the Mayo Health System came along with threats to halt a big building project that they had planned in Rochester, supposedly. And they're threatening the governor and the legislature that they would not do this project and possibly even pull out of Minnesota. I'm not sure what all that communication has been about, unless they were exempted from this requirement. We are asking you to contact the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Speaker of the House to stand with nurses and support this bill with no carve-outs for the Mayo Health System. Because obviously, if you carve out one hospital or one system, every other hospital is going to say, well, what about me? And so a link in the chat will connect you to these offices. I put the link, it should be at the very top of the chat. This is a little photo display of what's going on at the Capitol right now. Minnesota Nurses Association and people who are allies of nurses are camped out outside the governor's office. He is not very happy about this, as I hear. And lots of information for legislators and anyone in the public who passes by. But they're really trying to call attention to this. Would have had maybe one conversation with the governor, but would like more. And this is some information about short staffing and increase in errors with insufficient nursing staffing. So just thought I would give you that picture there right outside the governor's office, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and would welcome anyone coming to stand with nurses. Other than Mother's Day, I believe they're going to take Mother's Day off until the end of the session. Anybody have any comments about this that I haven't covered? Oh, so I put a link in the chat for you that connects you to an easy way to comment on this issue. There might be some pre-programmed comments. You can take those out and personalize the message for yourself or use parts of what's already pre-populated, but it's going to go to 4 places. Any comments from anyone that anything I've missed?
And this is Jean. Anyone is welcome to come and participate in our sit-in. Stay for a little bit, stay for a long time. The hallway is busy with legislators, especially coming over from the state office building through there's an exit just beyond the photograph here. And the governor's office is where Marcia is standing there in the open doorway. So they're passing through, they're on their way to the chambers or other meetings. And so we're handing out buttons. We're trying to get people support, their verbal support to know that they are going to stand strong on this bill. But we need lots of people. The nurses are working too, because we're, don't have adequate staffing in our hospitals. So it's difficult to take time off, and we could use lots of people, have a free red shirt and join the crew who's doing a sit-in, like you said, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Any amount of time you could donate in the hallway outside of Mother's Day. So appreciated, and thank you for your support.
Thanks, Jean. So my challenge to all of us is to use what we've learned this evening to bring more people to the fight for a just and equitable healthcare system for all of us. I made up this form a while ago. It's a way of keeping track of people, individuals you've talked to, groups you've talked to, talking to people, just even thinking ahead about who you might approach about this issue, and keeping track and follow up is really important as an organizing and base building tool. We'll send this out with the post-meeting information. We sent it out before, but it's just a worksheet to use if you find it helpful. So again, building our base of support, using keeping track of contact information. It's an easy way of keeping track how to get how to reach people you've talked to, and invite to future events. Organizing 101 is invite them to the next thing. And our next thing is going to be an update or a session wrap up, I guess, and then some what volunteer opportunities are going to be happening. And it's not just in the Twin Cities Metro. We've got activists in Duluth, Mankato. Jean's done some stuff in Northfield, and we will have to push out to greater Minnesota. Obviously, we can't just get this done with what's going on here in the Metro. So, Judy and Jen, would you like to wrap us up?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, George Greene from Connections Lab, for coming and speaking with us. We really enjoyed hearing your perspective, and we look forward to chatting with you in the future. For everyone who is here, we will be emailing out the resources, including the video of this presentation. Please share it widely. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reply, and we're happy to work with you. So we look forward to seeing you again the second Thursday of next month. In June, we're going to be debriefing the legislative session and all of the bills that we had supported. How did it go? Where did it go? And so we look forward to seeing all of you back here next month. Thanks so much.
Does everybody knows how to pull up something in the chat? If you click on a link in the chat, you can pull it up. So if you want to help us out with the safe staffing or the keeping nurses at the bedside action. And then there's also the link for the Connections Lab website. And if you want to save the chat, it's got those three little dots on the bottom. You can save chat if you're interested. And I meant to ask Rose if you had any comments to close us out. Anything you wanted to add?
She might have
Did
stepped
she
away.
sign off? Okay. All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. George Greene, for all of your work on this event. This was amazing.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. This was fun.